Welcome, everyone. The time is 7:30, and I'd like to call the District 204 regular action meeting to order. I ask all to rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvord?
Present.
Member Aubert?
Here.
Member Vita Daniels?
Present.
Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Grutch?
Here.
Member Swinehart?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
My motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
Marilyn, do you need to call the roll? No.
Member Alvord?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Grutch?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Aubert?
Yes. Okay. Okay, first we'll have our agenda-related public comments. Marilyn, do we have any agenda-related comments?
No agenda related.
We will have a second opportunity for any public comments at the end of our meeting before we adjourn. So next we have public comments from LTEA President Andrew Johannes. Hello, Andrew. Welcome.
How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
So I'd like to start off by saying the teachers would like to send out our thoughts and prayers to the two students and their families who were injured this past month. Our hearts break for them and hope they are able to recover. We are in the final weeks of classes and preparing for finals next week. The weather is turning nicer and students are excited about summer vacation. The seniors celebrated prom last Thursday and their official last day of school will be on Friday. It is hard to believe, but the 2022-23 school year is coming to an end. I'd like to honor the senior class this month. This class has been through a very unique journey during their high school career. Their freshman year was cut short due to the pandemic. During their sophomore year, the students were first remote, then moved to hybrid. Their junior year was mostly mask, and thankfully their senior year has been much more normal. The class has so much to be proud of, and the teachers would like to say congratulations. We are fortunate to have such amazing seniors who led by example for the rest of the school to follow. They have accomplished so much in their 4 years, from sports championships, club victories, state appearances, and titles, to extraordinary academic accomplishments. Every step of the way, the seniors have stepped up and achieved many great things. The teachers are so proud of them and wish them the best of luck for their future endeavors. It is always exciting to see former students become exceptional adults. On behalf of a grateful faculty, thank you for making LT a great place. I would also like to share a few highlights for the work that teachers have done. Congrats to Spanish teacher Lisa Plichta and the Foreign Language Department. They held their 9th Pulsera sale and raised $3,500 for the Pulsera project. Over the 9 years, LT has raised more than $30,000, which has officially made the LT the highest selling high school in the nation. Truly amazing, and another example of the positive ripple effect LT has on the community and beyond. Congratulations to Michael Vall and Chris Baczynski and the class of 2023 students that participated in the baccalaureate. The reflection program was fantastic and is a nice way to end the year for the seniors. Congratulations to all spring sports. Most are finishing up their seasons and once again have done LT proud. Finally, a big thank you goes out to Dara Boy, Maggie Quain, Martha Berg, Lauren Rabbit, Shannon Donahue, and Kurt Johns. They organized the Wellness Week for the faculty and staff this past week. The activities included yoga, workouts, creative spaces and cookies, a morning walk, and a raffle and prizes. A wonderful effort and a very nice way to enjoy the company of coworkers as we end the year. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone a happy summer and look forward to seeing everyone back here in August. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for coming to all of our action meetings and always keeping us informed and also very connected with all the amazing things that are happening here. And the staff is clearly, a huge part of that and the heartbeat of LT, so we really appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, we can move on to our agenda items now. First, we have our superintendent report from Dr. Waterman.
Thank you, President Albert. So I want to start off just by reiterating some information that we have previously shared with the LT community regarding both the serious incident that happened outside of North Campus on May 1st and regarding the student who was struck by a vehicle near North Campus on May 10th. Both of our students are still receiving medical treatment for their injuries, and our hearts and our well wishes continue to be with them, their families, and their loved ones. Regarding the student injured in the altercation on May 1st, District 204, in collaboration with the LaGrange PD, just wants to be clear that this is still an ongoing investigation. This was an isolated incident and does not pose a further threat to our community. We've appreciated the work of the LaGrange Police Department. They've worked closely with our leadership team throughout this investigation, and certainly will continue to do so moving forward. This is, just such a challenging time for our community. And our student services staff continue to provide support for our students. In addition, school safety has and will continue to be a point of discussion here at LT. With 4,000 students and 400 plus staff spread across 2 campuses, safety is always our #1 concern. We regularly review and update our safety response, which includes a wide variety of areas: violent critical incident plans, evacuation plans, crisis response teams, threat assessment teams, and bias response plans as well. The last few weeks have certainly served as another reminder of just how important these research-based plans are. And most importantly, we want to thank our caring community for the patience and the support that it continues to show during this difficult time. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce the 23-24 student representative to the Board of Education, Sophia Szymanski. Sophia was selected from an outstanding candidate pool of interested students and really just flat out shined during the interview process. Sophia is from LaGrange. She attended middle school at Gurry Middle School and is the daughter of Bartek and Kathleen Szymanski, who have joined her here this evening. Sophia participates in Model United Nations, in French Club, in Future Healthcare Professionals, in Polish Club, Peaceable Schools Initiative, and is actually the founder of Chemistry Club here at LT. She's been inducted into the French National Honor Society and the National Honor Society, and she also serves as a World Language Drop-In Center tutor. So she's a little busy here at LT. We're excited to welcome Sophia to this role. She will officially begin her tenure at the August regular action meeting. Sophia, congratulations again and welcome to your new role, and thanks to your parents for being here this evening as well. Any words of advice for the board before you start in August? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm super excited for this upcoming journey to highlight the student voices here at LT and the amazing accomplishments that my peers and students here have accomplished. I look forward to working with you all in a great upcoming year for the 2023-2024 school year. So thank you again.
Awesome.
Great, thank you, and welcome again.
We're excited to have you, Sophia. It's always one of our favorite parts of the meeting is the student report, to hear what's going on in this amazing school. And much like staying connected with our staff, you will provide such a valuable spot for us in that connection. So we really appreciate you taking on the role.
So moving along, we are excited to share some feedback from our most recent LT Community Advisory Council meeting, which was held on April 26th. The topic of discussion was assessment and academics here at LT. Specifically, the Advisory Council heard a presentation that included SAT performance data, as well as AP and dual credit participation, and information on our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools. Our presenters that evening were Scott Eggerding, Director of Curriculum, Jennifer Rowe, Director of Equity and Belonging, and Christine Zeman, Coordinator of Assessment and Research. So tonight, our LTCAC Chair, Shelley Taylor, is here with us to share that feedback. Shelley, thanks so much for being here and to share the feedback from our most recent meeting.
Of course, thanks for having me here. I have to say, I think I say this every time, but I'm always impressed by this group. It was a really nice night, and I wasn't sure. It was one of the first nice nights, right? I was like, I don't know. They all showed up,
Yeah.
and this group always is just so attentive to the presentations and really engaged in the discussions. And this one in particular, I think there was some really great outcomes from their discussions. So I'll hit some highlights. I know that the full minutes are available to you to dive into. So the first question asked of the group was, how can we improve community awareness about academics at LT? And this came up a few times, and one of the biggest things that came up was better communication and alignment with feeder schools, being aware that a lot of that is now happening. And it's interesting, we have at least a couple members of the council who have students at the feeder schools and not at LT yet, which is great. And I think that that's where some of that conversation sparked from, was the thought that getting some more of these families that are kind of future LT families involved earlier and aware of what's happening with LT would be really helpful. So connecting with families while the kids are younger. I think some of this was discussion about the kind of articulation from 8th grade to LT, providing some sample 4-year plans for students to kind of help students plan a little bit better. We were talking about AP and dual credit courses, so more information about that, and we have another question later where we dive into that a little bit more. Some other suggestions were community coffees held during the day and evening times to kind of accommodate all schedules. I think the LT by the numbers flyer is really well received, so there were suggestions of doing a version of that that's focused just on academic information. There was also a suggestion for an engaging slideshow or video added to the new community page on the community page on the new website, I should say. Discussion panels with students and teachers, talking about a variety of courses at each grade level. I think we talked about the amazing variety of courses available to students at LT, which can also be an overwhelming variety of courses, right? So just providing some more information than earlier is kind of the theme here. And then again, I think this came up in this question, but I think it was more related to the AP experiences, talking about sharing some peer-to-peer stories and doing some student spotlights. There was a lot of talk about getting students to take kind of their first AP course, and maybe if we highlight some students with their experience and their ability to succeed, that would help encourage other students who might be a little trepidatious about it. So then we did get into the dual credit and AP courses. How can we increase enrollment in those? We know that there's a goal to get as many students as possible taking at least one. One thing that came up a lot again was teacher recommendations and referrals. There was a lot of attendees speaking about just the influence that teachers have. And it's one thing if your counselor is like, hey, I think you could try this class, but if it's a teacher who's taught you in that subject area who's like, hey, I think you can handle this and I think you should try this, that can go a long way. And then following through that, because these are high school students, if there's follow-up with the parents, then that can get reinforced at home, because this probably happens a lot with teachers, but maybe it doesn't go beyond that sometimes. And that was another thing, was closing the gap between student discussions and home, just making sure that kind of parents know what they're being encouraged to do. Student-teacher panels came up again here. Somebody suggested, and I think again this is largely coming from 8th grade into freshman year, maybe be a little bit more courageous with enrolling kids in some more advanced classes and give the opportunity to have a conversation and pull back if they need to, but kind of assume the best, I suppose, was the mentality there, and try enrolling kids in a little more challenging classes and kind of start pushing them from the beginning to try for that higher achievement. And then, support, we talked about some supports for a specific group with taking the AP class for the first time, but, supporting all of the students taking AP, helping them plan and helping them take the right courses to prepare for AP classes so that they're able to be successful. Then there's some discussion about leaning on some community volunteers as mentors to kind of generate some excitement about some of these course areas, probably related to a career that could lead to, as well as maybe helping with some student check-ins as they're going through. And then peer mentoring was another option suggested there. And then one of the favorite things is we get to talk about what we want to talk about next year. So there were a lot of suggestions. I kind of highlighted the ones that came up the most. Definitely the one that came up the most was talking about kind of whole student and mental wellness programs. And a lot of interest in understanding what's happening at the school, what's available to the students, how it's communicated, and to make sure that they're aware of what's available. Another one was college and career pathways. You know, Dr. Ettergy, right? Shared that 80% of the students about go on to college, so there's 20% who are doing other things. And recognizing that sometimes that's a little bit harder to track, we just, there was a lot of discussion about what we're doing to encourage that group of students and to make sure that they kind of have some clear paths and that they know what their options are. There was interest in some athletics and extracurriculars. I think we usually do something about some kind of unusual programs, but you know, maybe something a little bit broader. And again, I think generating awareness of what all the options are that are available to students can help everybody in the community encourage our students to get more involved. The relationship with feeder schools, again, was one that came up. And then it was also suggested that we focus on topics that we can tie directly to the strategic plan so that we understand kind of how all of that is following out from the goals. So that was it. So we're done for the summer.
Yep.
And then we'll be back at it again next year. So thank you all. For
Shelley,
listening.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Shelley.
much,
Thank you
Shelley.
so much.
So one quick note on the LTCAC. The presentation that was delivered that night, our team's in the process of doing a voiceover on that slide deck, and we'll get that posted to the website. That way, even people who weren't there can follow along and learn more about assessment and academics. And then, of course, we get into August, first couple weeks of the school year, we'll do a whole new recruitment drive for new LTCAC membership and hope to get a lot of people sign up and participate.
So, a question. So, will some of this feedback go to, like, the strategic plan teams in terms of when they're working, where it's applicable, go to those teams to further build out?
Yep, absolutely. So like the summary that she gave, we have raw data that we give to our leadership teams, and then the summary she gave goes to our strategic plan teams as well.
Okay, so we should be seeing, like, some of that being incorporated into, like, kind of
Absolutely, yeah.
recommendations as we are
Regardless of
moving
the
along,
topic,
like,
absolutely. All the feedback that we get from that community group, we're incorporating it into.
Okay.
And how many members was LTCAC this year again?
So we have 125 on the roster.
Okay.
We get consistently 60 to 70 that show up
That's great.
each
And-
meeting.
And how long now has it been, because it used to be, it was limited, but we don't limit it
Right,
anymore to
right.
as many people can
Yeah, we
apply,
used to
so-
have, it was like a two-year membership, and we only took so many people. This year, we just opened it up. So anyone who applied, we put on the list, they got the invites each meeting, and so really anyone's welcome to come.
And they don't have to stop going after 2 years.
Right,
They can
right,
continue.
right.
Okay, that's great.
Yep.
It's helpful.
Oh,
I've been on it before.
We have a lot of alums
maybe,
here.
yeah. I'll come back.
So moving along, just a quick monthly FOIA report. The district's received 8 FOIA requests since the April meeting, and all of those are included as an itemized list within your personal board packet here this evening. And then, just finally, I also want to recognize the class of 2023. Last month, the board adopted a resolution honoring our senior class, and throughout the month of May, we continue to celebrate their accomplishments. We had prom last Thursday down at Navy Pier. Huge kudos to Dr. Tyrell and the building leadership team for planning and coordinating a great event. And then later this week, we'll host the class of 2023 senior awards ceremony. That's a kind of a coordinated effort of the College and Career Center, plus Scott Eggerding, Dr. Tyrell, the whole group. And then, of course, next week's the big night. Wednesday, May 31st, we'll celebrate class of 23 commencement ceremony on Bennett Field. So I just wanted to send out a warm congratulations to the class of 2023. And that concludes my superintendent report for this evening.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on, we are going to some unfinished business action items. And the first item that we have tonight is the additional textbook changes requests. This is a second reading, and Scott Eggerding, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you, President Aubert. We have talked about this quite a bit. We've talked about textbooks for most of the spring, but a lot of that is because we've been going through the curriculum review process. And In particular, those teams were really looking to make some changes for the fall, which is why we have a little bit more on the docket for a late approval. That being said, there's been no changes. We have had the materials on display here in the boardroom for the last month. We've received no requests or inquiries to review the materials. With that being said, I think it's important that we do make sure we are as open and transparent about our course materials as we can be, and so that's why we do that. Probably the biggest things is we're making some changes to our bilingual program next year and bringing in a new EL program. We're very excited about what it can do to individualize learning for second language learners. We also are making some changes to our freshman courses, in particular English 1, bringing in a lot of choice for students, one prep in particular, allowing to choose 2 different novels throughout the year, the Excel and Honors having one choice. And then making a couple of shifts to our AP US Government Politics, having a textbook that is a little more accessible and current, and some of our new courses, so exploring medical language for our medical terminology course, which will actually be kind of a go-to text, I think, for students as they follow their passions towards medical careers. So it's a nice broad range. It is, Brian Stashek and I talked a little bit about that EL purchase, it being an online and relatively expensive. That's something we believe we can cover with the allocated amount from the state regarding EL programming. So it's about $10,000. So that's, we're leaving it in as a potential request, but we're very confident we'll be able to cover that way. I did update the chart. In the previous years, I haven't added in the additional amount, so it's somewhat a little off, but our final number there at 148 is still in line with quite a few years of purchasing. So with that, I'd recommend that the board approve the textbook instructional material change request as presented.
Thank you. Any board questions or discussion on the textbook changes or requests?
Stuff, good changes to the EL. We talked about it. Feels like forever ago, but I remember we had
Yeah.
a long discussion, so.
And when will you know about the $10,000, if that will be, when will we find that out?
So that's typically a grant that we receive annually from the state of Illinois, and it usually is right around $10,000, and so that'll be a good use of that money.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? No? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the additional textbook change requests as presented?
So moved.
Second. Marilyn, will you call the roll?
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Grutsch?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member O'Bear?
Yes. Okay, great. Next, we're moving on to new business action items. And the first item will be our Press 111 policy update. And Ed Piotrowski, I will turn this over to you for that update.
Thank you, President Albert. Tonight, we are reviewing policies that are included in Press Issue 111. As a reminder, the school district utilizes the press service through the Illinois Association of School Boards to help us maintain compliance and make sure that our policies are up to date whenever there are school code or legislative changes that would necessitate changes to our school board policies. Tonight, we do have 14 policies for review. 4 of these policies are 5-year reviews. There have been no changes to these policies, but Press recommends at least once every 5 years to review the policies, make sure that they are still in good standing in terms of what the district practices in relation to each one of those policies. We are not recommending any changes to those to those 4 policies. There are 10 policies that have been updated. Not all of those policies have substantive language updates. We do have 2 policies that have been reviewed by our legal counsel. Information about those 2 specific policies has been included in the board materials. The remainder of those policies have updates that are necessitated by changes to school code, changes to legislation, changes that don't affect generally how the policies are interpreted or applied, but rather changes to legal footnotes. At this time, we're happy to answer any questions that the board might have on any of these policies.
Anyone have any questions or comments about the,
And I did have a question under policy 2110, the qualification terms, duties of board officers. It says that they updated fingerprint-based criminal history screenings, sexual misconduct related employment history reviews. And I noticed it says they are completed for the superintendent. Do we need to say that that's handled through the HR department? Because I don't know if that's necessary or if it's sort of implied.
Right. I don't know if if we would need to say it. It would be something that would be handled through the HR for any employees, right? And that includes, the superintendent. We would conduct all of those. Yes, that you'll see that language or very similar language is included in many of these policies for review today.
Yeah.
That is as a result of the new legislation for faith law.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely.
other questions? On
Which
any,
one are we looking at, like the 6-230?
we're looking at all of the.
You mean which one?
That was
They
called
carry.
out.
They carry. Which
Oh.
one? I didn't know which one.
She's talking about a different
She was
one.
talking about 210,
Right.
2110.
Did you
Right,
have
are we
something?
just throwing out any?
Yeah.
Yeah, any questions that you have on any of the policies that are part of the press update?
So with the library media program, 6-230, we do have already like a objections process, like that's already in place.
We do. That's
So, right, so this is just codifying that?
Yeah, so what we have in place, and Scott can talk more about this too, but it's a procedure we use when we get a complaint. We haven't had one in about a year and a half, but that would be the practice we'd use. This policy just codifies that. We do have the first bullet point. This is interesting. Franzic recommends not including, or says that number 7 is optional on that because it references the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights. We actually use the Library Bill of Rights to select material, so we would recommend that stay in the policy because it's what we use.
Okay.
And that's highlighted on the memo. I don't know if the board has any thoughts on that, whether we include it or not.
It makes sense to have it there.
Yeah, so we'd be omitting the first, we would take their suggestion of their first bullet point and omit that first
Right,
section,
right.
but not the second
Right,
section.
right.
And I would assume that the process that you have in place for when parents are contesting those books, we would still keep that in play and continue to now reference our updated policy.
Yep.
Okay.
I can also share a link to that process with the board this
Okay.
week. Yep.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great. Any other questions, comments about the policies?
I guess my only other question was going to be, because I know, it seems like a lot, is it Faith's Law that's made a great impact on a lot of what we've had? Do you expect or think there will be other policies that have yet to come up that might be a result of that law that was enacted in 2021?
I don't believe so at this time that there would be any. There's been sort of a rolling update to
Right.
policies as Aaron's Law got updated, and Faith's Law has already been in place. There was just a trailer bill that added some new legislation and some new requirements that go into effect as of July 1st, 2023. So that's where you're seeing these. The most recent updates include an employment history review that is required for all people who work in a school that have regular and routine contact with school-age children. And so that's where you see all of these things come into play for that that 2110 that you referenced, Carrie, but then policy 5150, 5260, and 530, those all relate to the hiring practice or the process of bringing new people in via, student teachers. And so that's where you will see those. All of the other policies that relate to qualifications or required trainings, those have already been updated either through Press 109 or Press 110. Now, should there be additional legislation that updates Faith's Law or Aaron's Law, then we certainly could. But from what the legislation is right now, I believe that this would round out the rest of those policies.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And is there discussion or plans or ideas on how to put this training out to the staff?
There are. We've been discussing how we can work either through the beginning of the school year or through the training options that we have, right, to provide that training as well.
The only question,
Absolutely.
I sent in some questions ahead of, I had the chance to ask some questions to Brian. The one that I'm still not clear on is 590. It seems like Frantic has made some recommendations for some language in 590 that we didn't include as part of our update. Can you speak to that, Ed?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. And a lot of that is really just how the policies come to us formatted from press. So we receive the policy recommendations or updates from press. That is the document that will have the green highlighting, where press is recommending changes. That is a document that we can't officially change until there's been board action on that. So what you see in those copies that have the green writing, and it'll say, footnote, press +1, press +2. Those are the press recommendations. Anytime that there is additional language recommendation or changes, omissions that we might get from legal, we will have that in a separate memo. What we then do is we will make those recommendations to the Board of Education. Our recommendation is that we would include the forensic recommendations for that policy 590, and then if the board were to approve that, when we make those adjustments in press and send the board approved language, it would include that at that time. But we're unable to make those changes ahead of any sort of board approval process.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's good, because they seemed to be appropriate changes and good language to add in there. So this is just, this is our first reading. It was on as an action item, but we're going to do a first reading and move this to an action item in our June meeting. So during a second reading is when we'll have the kind of final marked up copies, or just not marked up,
Well, it still wouldn't show that because we're unable to do that until it's actually board approved.
Then we go in and make the
Okay.
changes.
Right, it's a software program, so it's very different than like a Microsoft Word file that we could edit. We can't edit it
I see.
until we have board approval, because then we have to provide board approval dates and all of those things. So unfortunately, just with their system, we're not able to show those markup. We have to work between those two.
I see. Okay.
You're right, these would come back then in June for a
In
second,
June
for a
for a
second
second
reading
reading.
and consideration for approval.
So before we close this, any other comments, or are we good to close this?
Sorry, just one more.
Okay.
One of the recommendations was to change the accommodations for individuals title. Any thoughts or updates on that?
Yeah, Dr. O, can you speak to that one?
Absolutely. I think the piece that I was concerned with was just the language in terms of making it feel as if I think there's a difference between accommodations and accommodating. And so I think by changing that, it's not placing the burden on individuals that have disabilities, but recognize that we need to be open and support. So I think just, again, the language that we use and the way that we use words makes it seem open versus a burden.
Thank you.
Which policy is that?
That is
870.
870.
Okay, so then if we are good, we will see these again in June for the second reading, and move it to action at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, our next new business agenda item is an update to Board Policy 2150 committees. Brian Waterman.
Yeah, so way back in January, it was actually at the January 9th Committee of the Whole meeting, the board was reviewing Press 110 and requested additional information regarding policy 2150. With the recent change in committee structure that the board has gone through, our existing policy no longer matches the board's practice. So we reached out to Forensic at the board's request and said, hey, give us some ideas on potential language for this policy. And so they provided additional guidance, and based upon the board's current practice and legal update, they're recommending the board approve an updated policy 2150 as outlined in the attachment. So in the board book, there's actually two copies. There's the clean version of it and then the red-lined version as well. So you can see what it used to read and what the updated policy would read now.
Any questions or discussion on that policy? You think,
That looked accurate.
Okay.
Is this something we're having a second reading on also, or is this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would bring this one back
Yeah,
as well.
for sure.
And if we did at any point choose to convene some committees, we would be able to still do that within the realm of this policy without going back and changing it. Yeah, so, everyone good with that one?
Just for clarity. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay. And then our final new business agenda item is the 2023-2024 capital outlay requests, and I will turn it over to Brian Stachek.
Thank you, President Aubert. So this is a list that we typically bring to the board this time of the year. Let me give you a little history on this. What ends up happening is this list is generated by all of the staff throughout the district. I start talking to the division chairs, supervisors, even the district level administration, usually in December, and I start saying, look at what your capital and equipment requests are going to be for the upcoming for the next fiscal year budget, and then we typically open that up for submission in February, and that typically goes for about 6 weeks until that Friday or so before, before spring break. And so really, everyone in the district has some opportunity to present some information or request, again, to a supervisor, to a division chair, something along those lines, and then they can make the decisions whether they want to put those forth or not. So that's really how this list is generated annually. And so, again, the list that you have before you is not like we've seen in the past, and the reason is because, as we were talking about press, last year we updated the capitalization policy so that the threshold is now $5,000. A long time ago, it was $1,000, then it was $3,000, and now it's up to $5,000. And that certainly has a lot to do with just over time, the inflation and cost of items. And so really, essentially, what you're looking at here now is with that change, these items here should be, on the capital list, would be one that's, something that is $5,000 or more on one individual item, okay? And then what I've done is I've pulled out the rest of the items that are on that have been put on that list that potentially could have been capital in the past, but now are just equipment items. So the board truly, in the past, has just approved the capital outlay. However, with this change, I still wanted you to see what is being requested, so we're not kind of diluting some of the history on it and that sort of thing. So that being said, as you see the list before you, this list really represents the recommended list at this point, includes really the majority of all of the priority one requests. And when these items are submitted, we ask for a prioritization of, one is really, we need to have this really next year to continue to run our programs. Two is, hey, look, we're kind of getting close on this. This is, maybe 2 to 3 years out. And three is really kind of wish list, boy, if there's extra money, we'd really like to have this, okay? And so really the majority of these are, like I said, are the priority one requests that we have on this list. There's a couple of factors that go into this still that are kind of unknown at this point. So, as you recall back to the 5-year financial forecast that we talked about in March, I have a section there that breaks out what we're anticipating for capital expense. And so we had about $1.7 million total with technology and capital equipment. That does not include the building renovation projects. And so, we're about $500,000 higher right here. for the recommendations. And I think we're going to be okay in terms of putting that into the budget. That being said, I still need to look at a couple of items here as we move forward. One is, here we go with our friend, the corporate personal property replacement taxes again. What does that look like for next year? I don't know yet. Again, what we usually see is an estimate from the Illinois Department of Revenue in August. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that one. We're also looking at, staffing, where we're adding staffing. When I put that 5-year forecast together, we had not settled the contract with the certified staff yet, so that is done at this point. And then we're also, there were some additions to staff as well since that point. And so I have to continue to watch that and then see where we're going in terms of total cost. And again, the board here typically has said, what we're going to do is obviously with capital, we're going to look at this and adjust it so that we're balancing the budget, unless of course the board decides that there may be a reason to use some reserves. And typically that is for the capital projects, not necessarily for this, but certainly we could also use it for some of these expenses as well. So that being said, the total request here is almost $2.2 million, $2,188,000. And again, we would ask the board to approve these requests tonight, and I will then continue to make adjustments as we go through the summer, look at what some of those final budgeting numbers look like, if there's any changes, because again, we certainly want to bring a balanced budget to the board in August for first review. But I do think we'll be okay under, with this dollar amount. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So Brian, when you say we'll be okay, that means we don't need to go into reserves for that. You think we'll be covered?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
And really, one of the reasons I say that is because we'll be talking about the summer projects for the summer of 2024 and how we're going to fund those. So I think there's going to be some money available from that potentially. As you recall, I had like $5 million set aside in the financial forecast, and there's a potential that we'll have bond money to use on those instead. So we may be able to use some of that $5 million on some of this cost as well. It's sort of a big puzzle at this point, but we'll continue to look at that and see. So yes, to answer your question, I don't think we'll have to go into reserves at all for any of this. Now, could it be possible that we would look at some additional, projects or something into 24 and into 25 with some of the reserves? Yeah, I think that's very possible. But if we do sell bonds, the best case scenario is to spend the bond money first, because you typically have 3 years to do so. So we're better off to move that money out and then use district money at a later point in order to cover any additional costs that we have, if that makes sense, hopefully.
Thank you.
So did some of the number one priorities not make the list, or did everyone's number ones get on the list in the 2.2 million?
So generally, it's a great question. Generally speaking, all of the priority ones made the list, except for there's a few items that I know we can't actually obtain, and those have to do with vehicles. In this particular request, you'll see that there are requests for some replacement mini buses in the district, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get those. The lead time on those is potentially anywhere from 6 months to a year right now. And so there was a request for a couple of more of those, and I said, look, I don't even know if we're going to be able to get these two, but let's at least prove these two, and then go forward from there and see what we can get. So that was the majority of those items that were not there.
I love the summary and just had noticed that certain departments or certain groups have zeros. Loved seeing a modest amount, an appropriate amount of co-teaching furniture.
Yes.
That's something we had talked about at a previous
That's
meeting.
right.
And I think I saw 2 sets of math and science flexible seating, so can't wait to hear some of the feedback on, I don't know why I'm so stuck on the furniture, but it seems to come up, maybe it comes up in my household a lot with kids with sore backs. But, and you explained the threshold, so ongoing, I'll call them more operating expenses below the dollar threshold aren't on the list, but one thing that I kind of wanted to ask about was athletics, and just whether it's hearing from the community in a variety of fashions about some of the concerns around especially the non-varsity uniforms. For some of the sports teams,
Yeah.
uniforms would be not a capital item that would appear on this list, or would they be?
No, they would
wouldn't
not,
They'd be
no.
too small of a dollar amount, so that's handled in a different part of the budget.
That's right. So the uniforms, the team uniforms are handled as a supply.
As a
And
supply,
because they're,
okay.
again, they're small dollars when you take one uniform, and so really they're handled as supplies. And I work with John Grunke, the athletic director, on those annually. What he does is he provides me a list of uniforms to be replaced in that year, and then we budget for those. And so there is a rotating schedule for those that John maintains, and then we continue to move those around annually.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And by the way, one other thing I forgot to mention, you'll see some of the requests that are in, kind of highlighted in blue. And those will either be fully funded or partially funded by the grant money that we have available. So either Perkins or CTIG money that is available, we will be using those dollars to cover at least most of those requests. There's a couple of them there that we're going to do some partial funding, but at least there'll be some grant funding available for those also.
So that'll affect that final number, because that's not reflected, right, in the total?
It is.
Shared here?
It is.
Sorry,
It's
Oh,
all
grant
reflected in
there?
the, correct.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and the reason I do that is because, again, kind of going back to when we talk about the 5-year financial forecast, I include all of the grant money as a revenue source as well.
Okay, right.
So it's apples to apples.
Got
It's
it.
not, well, we have an expense here, but we don't have a revenue source for it, or vice versa. So I include those total dollars all together, both the revenue and expense side. Yep.
So Brian, I had a question related to technology, which I'm thrilled to see all of these updates for our classrooms and the teachers. For the Chromebooks, with the new inventory and the replacements, can you remind me of that cycle? And like for example, our graduating seniors, do they can buy back, or do those go into any kind of recycling? Remind me how that works.
So,
Or Ed, I see your hand up.
yeah, Ed, if you want to, you can go ahead and address that.
Yeah, so basically, right now, we have, with our inventory only really being 2 years old, we've not made that decision or recommendation to you.
Okay.
To then sell that inventory off. We are using them for a variety of program experiments, for example, trying to with attendance, trying to with testing, different types of activities, and then building that kind of that inventory so that when students do have problems with them, we can swap in and out really quickly, get them back to class, get them back active, and then we'll get the one that is having a problem to get that fixed or resolved down the line.
Okay, thank you.
In particular, next year, the SAT is going to an online-only test.
Yeah,
And so we want to have some laptops.
smart.
Just to make sure. Although we did do the Illinois Science Assessment in March, fully online with the juniors, and we only had 15 requests for a laptop or charge didn't hold. So we thought that was great.
Yeah.
So we just cross our fingers and hope that happens in the fall and spring as well.
Great. I like seeing all these line items. It's gonna be really important. Thanks, Ed.
I just had a follow-up question to the reserve discussion that we had. If this goes for approval today and we move forward with it, and then CC is personal property, whatever that,
Yeah.
I always butcher that every time I try and say it.
We all do.
It goes in the toilet, and we're now looking at potentially spending money in reserves. Will you be coming back to us to reallocate, look at this? Or will that just be something, since we approved it, we're moving forward on?
No, that's exactly right. And I kind of mentioned that in the executive summary there, where I say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to evaluate this as we go through the summer. So if for some reason, what we think we're going to have in CPPRT and now we don't, we would bring that, when I bring the tentative budget back to the board, we would address that at that point and say, look, if the board still wants to move forward with this, and it's going to cost us, $500,000 or $1 million in reserves, we can make that choice then, or we can say, nope, the recommendation would be to back out some of those purchases and bring that more in line with where we want to be.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, my goal is always to bring in, when we come in August, to bring a balanced budget to the board. And if it's not, then we'll have to make some decisions in terms of where we want to look at that and make some changes. And this is one of the easiest, I say easiest, that's not the right term. This is one of the areas where we can make those adjustments. Salaries, benefits, those types of things, we're going to have a much more difficult time doing that there. Sure.
And Brian, there's one other line item that was on here that I was interested in finding out a little bit more. It was the video camera upgrades
Mhm.
for South Campus and North Campus.
Mhm.
And it says it's the first phase. Okay, so, will we be, is it half of the project, do you know?
This is actually a pretty large portion, but
Okay.
yeah, I want to say it's probably about half. And truly, the first phase kind of was last year, because what we did is we upgraded
I
the head
remember,
end
yeah.
and all of that head end technology last year. So this is now adding the additional cameras to the facility and changing out some of the old ones with new. But I think we're about halfway or so with this.
So does that technology then, will that work with, like, will we still have older cameras, but does that affect their technology or their ability to be useful?
No,
The older
they can
ones?
still use those older ones. However, really over the course of time here, we're looking to replace all of those, so we have
Right.
all of the upgraded technology working together.
Okay.
Is there an urgency to it, or you're saying it all functions fine, and this is sort of a
Yeah, my
normal
understand-
cycle?
Yeah, my understanding is it's all functioning fine right now, but we're upgrading and we're really adding a lot more cameras. There's a lot more coverage in terms of what we're trying to, look at throughout the facilities and have those cameras where we don't have them now.
Right, it was a priority, I think we discussed last
It
time
is.
around, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And when you say normal, this is really somewhat of a new undertaking, I guess, if you will, for the district, because we certainly have cameras and video in place right now, but we're really expanding on this.
So it's not necessarily the replacement of the cameras, it's the addition of the cameras that we're talking about?
Yeah,
And
both,
And
both.
So because that was one of my questions too, is because we did spend some time talking about this, because wasn't there an issue with the older cameras not carrying the amount of days of footage that we wanted?
That was the old head-end system.
Okay.
And so that system was replaced this year.
Okay.
So now I think we're able to keep up like 30 days, right? We're able to maintain at least 30 days of data, where I think before we were down, maybe 5 or 6?
Even less, I think it was
Yeah.
around 3 days.
Yeah.
So we
So that-
improved significantly.
Right.
Which is,
Yeah.
So then how many more phases will we have of this before we're actually where we want to be?
One or two,
I think it's-
based on the total dollar amount that we decide to allocate within the next year or two. But I'll just reiterate, so we're looking at replacement, so new equipment to enhance the quality of the video that we're able to access. And then in addition, Adam Davis and Greg Gardner worked with an external company to do a full audit of coverage. And so the camera company walked the building, both campuses with both of them, to look at where our blind spots are in terms of coverage. So 2 goals are to get to full coverage and then start and continue replacing to get better quality from our cameras as well. So feel really good about this recommendation as a next step in the process. And certainly, we would anticipate that you would see another request then next year to continue to add and replace.
Okay, so it sounds like you've taken that, the output from that audit and kind of phased it into, this is the first phase, 2 more to come after that?
Yes.
1 or
With
2,
respect to
yeah.
that audit, okay. And from a timing perspective, we feel like we can wait the 2 years to roll this out?
I mean, we've been updating cameras every year
Yeah.
for the last 10 years. I mean, Ed Tennant, you can probably speak to this too, right? Like, we're always looking at the latest technology, looking to add, and over time, we're never going to be done with this, right? We're always going to be adding cameras,
Oh,
adding
constantly.
better cameras.
Yeah.
Like, we're never done with this project.
Okay.
So this phase that is up for approval, you'll add all of those rolling as they come in and.
In future years, yes, we'll bring those
But
back.
this coming school year
Yes.
though too, yeah.
Oh,
okay,
absolutely.
that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure it wasn't,
Right.
to be clear on that.
And there's also, I think, a limit to what we can get done in 1 year as well.
Fair.
That's the other part of this. We wouldn't want to say, yeah, let's do all this, because I don't think the expectation is that we would be able to add and replace everything that we want to do in one kind of, year, summer coming up here. It's really, that's why one of the other reasons that we're looking to kind of, piece this out over a number of years.
Well, I like the way that you prioritized it too. I mean, we had to do first things first with the head equipment, but
That's right.
now when you're talking about the blind spots and, you know, focusing on coverage too, that seems to be appropriate.
I just wanted to backtrack on one item. So thanks in the very beginning for reminding us about the $5,000 threshold.
Sure.
So when I looked back at last year's capital outlay requests, we did see all of our number ones that were at that time, you kind of marked them with a W and an L, because some we had already had approved, some we were waiting for the May meeting.
Yeah.
And then we saw some 2s and some 3s and so forth. Julie asked the question about, like, were there other ones that fell off the list? And it sounds like that's not really the case.
There
Sounds
were,
like we've-
there were a few, but
Okay.
not many.
Okay.
And again, when we were looking at those, I can go back and take a look, and I can share those with the board. That's not a problem. But again, there were a couple of vehicles in there that we said, look, we're probably not even going to be able to get these this year. Let's get these two.
Yeah.
And then I have to go back and look, but there aren't many more.
Okay. What about the items from last year that were ones? Because there were, I just kind of scanned through the list, and there were some that were over the $5,000 that we didn't get to last year. Did those roll over? I didn't map them out, but is there anything from last year that we didn't get to that would have remained on the list, or is still going to remain on the list moving forward?
There are not. We actually purchased most of the ones last year as well.
Okay.
And again, simply because somebody, they may put it as a 1, but administratively, we also review them and we say, okay, look, is this in fact while somebody has it listed as a 1, is that truly a 1? Is this truly the direction the district wants to go? And so we may look at those and say, yeah, we're going to hold off on this at this time, right? And then maybe in the future it comes back, but typically we kind of restart the list every year.
Right. So for those items that we didn't get to, if those were still burning priorities on the minds of our staff, of our division chairs, you would have expected them to put in for,
Correct.
again,
That's
as a
right.
1. So
Yes.
we feel like that we're handling the burning priorities that everybody has.
Right.
Okay.
And the first 3 under the capital outlay requests are an example of that. The used vehicles for the auto programs were on there last year, as well as the aftermarket modifications. At the time, we didn't have the CPPRT that we have this year, and we were looking at, could we get by with what we have? And then also this air compressor and air dryer unit, it's been a problem for quite a while. And so we've just been, it's not a cheap enhancement, and we just wanted to make sure we had the right money. So, yeah, we review those things pretty closely, especially in the curriculum side. I do. That's
Other questions?
That was a good-looking list.
Yeah.
Had a good variety. Yeah, agree.
Yep.
This is one of the largest dollar amounts that we've
This
had
isn't it? Yeah.
in a long time.
Yeah.
And the technology,
Like
sorry,
needed.
no, I guess I have another question.
Yeah.
The technology, sometimes we talk about a long-range plan, 3 to 5 year technology roadmap. This looks like about half this, not quite half the spend is in the technology area, which on the surface feels like it makes sense. Is the dollar amount pretty much in line with that plan? Is this, or is that plan a different plan?
No, it is. That's
It's the same
accurate.
plan, okay.
It is. Yep.
Is there a two-part?
cyclical replacement of teacher laptops,
Yeah.
monitors. What the big change, it's a little bit less, is where you see the docks in teacher classrooms. Prior to making this shift for next year and putting docks for any laptop to go in and connect to the projector and other devices in the room, we've had a standalone computer in there. And so having that many extra computers, we've been wanting to make this change for quite some
Great.
time. And so now that we have more of our staff with the laptops and updated laptops, we can make that shift for next year. And Ed's staff has been testing them, make sure it'll do all the things that we want them to do. So now we won't have a teacher sitting next to a computer with a laptop in a classroom.
Got it. No, that's great.
And in the technology plan, we have about somewhere between 1.2 and 1.3 million dollars kind of budgeted annually for technology upgrades. The only difference this year is something that you may not have seen in the technology plan, or we haven't talked about, is that we're looking at replacing some of our larger copier machines. Those are going to be 6 years. They're 6 years old at this point. And so typically at about that time is when you start to have some issues with them. And so what we typically do with the copiers is we replace them in 2 phases as well. So we take the largest machines, the ones that really run the majority of the copies in the copy centers, replace those first, and then usually the next year we'll come back and replace all of the smaller machines throughout the district. So again, the larger machines are on there for this year, and then we'll probably be bringing a request back to the board next year to replace the smaller machines throughout the district. And again, the ones that we have are, they're going to be 6 years old this year. And as I said, typically around that point, you start to have, for the amount of copies that we make on them, you start to have some issues with them, so.
And for us, better to own than to lease copiers
My,
due to kind of volume and.
yeah, I would say this. My feeling has always been, if you have the capital to purchase them, I think you're always better off. And the reason I say that is because there is some residual value to them
Sure.
when they're done.
Yeah.
And so we have something when it's all said and done. If we were to lease them, sure, you can continually turn them over. You're committed to a payment all the time with interest, and at the end of the day, you really don't have, obviously you don't have anything, you just keep turning them over. And that's a great solution. I think if you don't have the capital to pay for them outright, but since we do, it makes sense to me to do it that way.
Okay.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just looking again at the, which I really appreciate, the breakdown by category of our spends for like the last 5 years. But I've noticed that some categories have like, there's no dollars, we've not spent in 5 years. Do these categories get updated? Do we get added? Do we ever drop any? Do we need to drop any? I mean, are there certain things that just would never, have outdated themselves or antiquated, or they're covered under some other, plan?
So generally speaking, all of the different areas that you see here on the district, when I put this spreadsheet together, I don't know, it's probably maybe 7-8 years ago now, I tried to kind of take a look at, where all the different divisions that we have, all the different areas that we have in the district, and then kind of utilize that going forward. There are some areas, for example, that are probably may never have any capital outlay, right? Language arts is one where you don't see anything as far as capital outlay going forward. Typically, they're not purchasing that type of equipment. Textbooks and novels and supplemental materials, yes, but those are all supplies. So, you wouldn't see that on there. Now, that does not mean if I took it off the list, I'm pretty sure that year would be the year that they would say, hey, by the way, we need something, and I have to throw it back on there.
Flexible
So,
furniture.
yeah, so that's just kind of why I leave that
That's
on
true.
there, just in the event that, something would happen. But I try to cover most of the areas in the district there. And some of them we've broken out, obviously, like the copiers, for example, we put those on there as a separate item because we broke those out for the board before. But other than that, I think leaving them up there is good because, again, if we had something that came back later on, a year or two from now, and we had to put it back on there, then we'd have to put it back up in the history, bring that all back, so.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think it just depends on the needs of the division and really the equipment, that they're purchasing. Obviously, you'll see some in math, science, pretty much every year. You'll definitely see some from the principals are generating a lot of that equipment for the buildings. So, student desk, teacher desk, all that sort of thing. So those are going to be, the repeaters every year.
Okay.
And the grant-funded items in those curricular areas are placed under the curriculum grant area. So the radio station, TV station, we tend to use grant money for that. They're technically under language arts, and so we're not using district funds as much for those. We're using grant funds.
Right.
That's great, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the 2023-2024 capital outlay requests as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you call the roll, please?
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Aubert?
Yes. Okay, great. Moving on, we've now reached the consent agenda portion of our meeting. Our consent agenda includes the following items: payment of bills and financial statements for LTHS and LADSI, human resource items for LTHS and LADSI, extended summer contracts, 2023 unofficial list of graduates, review and approval of the meeting minutes, open and closed sessions, approval of donations, and overnight student travel requests. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Robert?
Yes. Okay, great. We've now reached the second opportunity for public comments. Marilyn, do we have any non-agenda related public comments?
We do.
Okay. Before we proceed, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us at tonight's meeting. There are two opportunities, and this is our second non-agenda opportunity for members of the audience to address the Board of Education. We will listen to all the comments, and the board appreciates and values hearing these comments from our community, but please understand that the board does not engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there's a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Finally, if each individual addressing the board will please limit themselves to 3 minutes for their comments, we would appreciate this. And in accordance with board policies 2:30, and 8:30, we thank you for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil. For all in attendance, Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
It's actually to be read.
Okay.
This is from Becky Lawrenson. Third annual Juneteenth Day celebration sponsored by Sisters of St. Joseph East Side LaGrange Residents Park District of LaGrange and Community Diversity Group, 4:30 p.m. on Monday, June 19th at the LaGrange Community Center, 200 Washington. The theme is No One is Free Until Everyone is Free. Dr. Bessie Boyd, longtime East Side LaGrange resident and LT alumni, former District 102 school board member, will MC interweaving stories of growing up as an African American in LaGrange and obstacles she was able to overcome. Also, Village of LaGrange President Mark Kuchler will start with opening remarks, and they will honor Minister Lynn Lacey for her community service. This is a wonderful opportunity to meet and interact with diverse members of our community. And the mosaic design has been approved for the Community Center, 200 Washington. Help us create the 8 murals with Green Star. The mural represents past, present, future on the community. Watch for emails with links to sign up for 1-hour workshops to lay tiles to create the design between 3 to 7 p.m. August 22nd to the 30th and Saturday, September 9th. To address safety concerns, anyone under 18 must be accompanied by an adult. Up to 3 participants less than 18 per adult. When complete, the mosaic murals will be attached to the building, and there will be a celebration in early October. That's it.
That's great. And there aren't any other?
Nope.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, at this time, the board will adjourn into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. And this is Illinois State Code, Section 5-120/2C1. Additionally, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. This is Illinois State Code, Section 5-120/2C. The board will not be taking action after the closed session. Can we have a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Robert?
Yes. Okay. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening.